Hello, everybody. Welcome to day 22, part 2, day 23 of our community real estate education. We're going to go ahead and jump into some important topics, which is what we did jump into an important topic yesterday, but we got a little sidetracked. And so today we're going to go ahead and jump into what we were going to talk about yesterday. It shouldn't be too long of a class, but I have been getting questions about property management and also contingencies, earnest money deposits, because some of my high school students have become licensed already. So I want to go ahead and start shedding some light on this right now. But before I do that, this episode is brought to you by, I'm just kidding, but this is Golden Pineapple. Look at this. These guys came by, Lazy Turtle Candles. They make natural candles. So good. Thank you, Deanna. And then, of course, our hats came in. Plow. If you want some our community merchandise. This is just round one. We've got 20 adult shirts coming, 10 kid shirts coming, and all sorts of good stuff. So feel free to come see us if you want a hat. Hats are 20 bucks. They're not free. Okay, everybody? Don't ask. Okay, here we go. Grand opening, March 18th, all that good stuff. So here we go. Let's go ahead and jump into property management right now. There's a lot of people that have been asking me about whether or not they should get involved in property management. And this is sort of it is an interesting, niche, but it is just that. And it is a niche, and you will have to become familiar with it. There are a lot of particular laws that go into, that you have to consider when you're dealing with property management. It's not something you can do by yourself. It's something that you're going to have to build systems. You're going to have kind of a squad or a team. You get what I'm saying? And so at the end of the day, if you consider getting into property management, and in fact, let's talk about that right now. Let's just do this, and then we'll add that, and then that way people know where it is that we're talking about here. Boom. Just move this down. We'll go bam. Property management is currently where we're at on the grand. Does that make sense? That makes sense. Okay, so right now we're on property management, and a lot of people talk about getting into it, but it takes money to get involved. You're going to have to handle money right away. There are certain things that you can do if you want to get started, but you're going to have to build that book of business relatively quickly if you want to have an efficient income from getting started in property management. There are people that, they manage 600 doors, 700 doors, and what they like about being involved in property management is it doesn't necessarily matter what the market is doing. They're going to continue to get paid like a CEO every month. So it's building that initial business and then having something foundational with which to stand on. And then, of course, a lot of these people that do hire you to rent out their property end up hiring you to list their home, even if you're a terrible property manager. So it's a great opportunity to meet people. I have been referring out people to other property managers for years. It's never something that I've gotten involved in. But like I said, if it was something that I were to get involved in, the way that I would do it is that I would try to get as many listings as possible, as many rentals as possible. Understand that there is a lot of benefit, of course, to holding real estate in the long term. What was that noise? Oh, it's a printer. There is a lot of benefit to holding real estate in the long term. So it is great retirement opportunities and whatnot, especially if you're near a military base, which is where we are. There's a lot of opportunity in buying with your VA loan, getting to a point to where you can coach your clients to where they can free up that 20% in equity. And I can tell you, if you live in our area, you've increased in equity $100,000 in the last year on average, which is a lot of equity. Now, there's a lot of people that are looking to sell and leave because they think that there's going to be a crash or because they think that all these different things are going to happen. But the truth is with this first-time homebuyer credit coming in from President Biden and with this big migration happening where people are moving due to where they want to live and opportunity versus where they feel like they have to live. And so what's going to happen is there's still going to be a lot of long-term opportunity in real estate. So if you buy VA, zero down, you hold the house, for a few years. In this market, of course, that hasn't been very hard to do to get a lot of equity. You refinance conventional, which is what I did, and then that frees up your VA loan to where you can reuse it. You can use it again, and then you could buy a secondary property. You could buy a new primary residence and then rent out your old property. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, and what this does is it gives you ownership, and then other people are paying off your mortgage. And so, I've coached a lot of people into hiring property managers or into renting homes out themselves, but it's just not something that I've necessarily jived with, and it's not necessarily something that I've wanted to jump into. Now, it is a huge opportunity, which is what brings me into what's happening right now, which is what's happening to the rental market. What's happening is that property rentals are not going down. In fact, the cost of rentals are going up. And the reason for that is that so many people have lost their jobs, have become unemployed due to COVID-19. And so they're in a situation where their main source of equity is in their home. And so when we look at a recession, a depression, what that tends to do with that lower 60, 70% is it tends to reset their wealth. And for that bottom, 25, 30%, drastically, like to zero. Because what happens is if you do have any equity, if you do have anything of worth, you sell it in order to eat, in order to prevent the government from taking everything from you or whatever. And so what's happening is the rental market is being overinflated with people who have decided I'll rent now and then I'll see what happens later. And so that's not necessarily something that is going to change. What needs to happen, and the best way to combat this is, of course, to build more homes, because otherwise what's happening is we're driving property up due to scarcity, and that's actually a really scary thing. What we need to do is we need to understand that more home buyers means that there's a lot of people that are paying property taxes, which eventually brings in more retail, and then more retail taxes means better schools, better city, a better street, being taken care of, et cetera, and so forth. And so I think that in my area, in Menifee, in Wildomar, in a lot of these areas that aren't necessarily as built out as, say, Temecula or Murrieta, you're going to see that boom, because people are going to be moving there for opportunity. And the gift in this shift is that there are a lot of people that are going to be starting businesses, surprisingly. 60% of small businesses went under, but there are a lot of people that are going to be starting businesses or have already started them, but they're running them skinnier. They're running them from their homes. They're running them, I talk to more and more people who are like, hey, listen, this is what I'm doing right now. It's, I don't have this or I don't have that because I'm working on cash. And that's what happened to France. That's what happened to a lot of England after the revolution was people started trading in goods. People started trading in ways that they couldn't be taxed for it. That's what you see with a lot of this cryptocurrency and a lot of betting against the dollar is what's happening. And you can't necessarily blame people for betting against the dollar or not necessarily wanting to pay taxes into a system that they feel isn't serving them. And so you see a lot of economy going underground during a time like this. You see more and more people transacting in trade or in cash. And so what happens to something like this is people feel like they need to hide their money in their mattress. That's sort of the mentality that was around the Great Depression and that sort of like hyperinflation when Wall Street was going nuts, and then 1929, was it 1929 or 1919? I think it was 1929, where the Wall Street crashed, the market crashed, and then we forget that all of this regulation that brought about the regulation of the market by dividing up the powers through the government actually made it so that we had a more stable economy, gave birth to a middle class, and there was a lot of labor unions. Government started hiring massively, and so what you saw was a resurgence. People started getting back to work. But people also saw that they couldn't necessarily depend on their government, and so people started starting businesses on their own. And so there is not this answer where people say, and of course I tend to go on these tangents, but I've been told, I'm a professor now, so I get to do that. Professor, I use quotes. But what happens is this healthy blend of socialism and capitalism, when you can have regular people starting businesses, starting them from the ground up, becoming relatively successful locally and now internationally because we have this globalized market that we're now participating in. And there was a big restructuring that happened when China gave up socialism entirely and then started entering into a lot of this capitalist structure and started creating goods and started manufacturing. And so you saw a lot of this globalization happen where the lower middle class in China came up and the middle class in America went down. And when the middle class in America went down, our middle class started going away, and we kind of took for granted a lot of the benefits that came from the restructuring, the government control, the government regulation. And what we've seen is not only the government regulation went away with the repeal of Taft-Hartley, and of course I'm going off on a lot of different information, but this all affects the rental market. What happened was people were, the banks stopped being regulated. We didn't fix this in 2008 after the last crash. So when we didn't fix this, we didn't address these problems, and we bailed out the banks, what happened was there wasn't any sort of regulation. We sort of went with this too big to fail mentality, and then we didn't restructure and we didn't re-implement the things that brought us out of the Great Depression and birthed the middle class. And so what I'm hoping is that we're going to see a emergence of the middle class with the understanding that we have to get back to the locality. Now, our particular area here, of course, is the largest concentration of warehouses anywhere in the world. That's because we can ship to Nevada, we can ship to Los Angeles, San Diego, Orange County, right? And so in the Inland Empire, you have the largest concentration of warehouses anywhere in the world. And so if we don't get to a point to where we bring back in the middle class, we bring back in sort of the union mentality of people being able to buy the goods that they're manufacturing, what's going to happen is we're going to see the sweatshop in south of the border, the sweatshop overseas become the sweatshop down the road. It's going to be the warehouse, right? And so we already see it with the weakening of the individual, making it illegal for people to unionize or even start to organize union movements. Amazon, of course, has hired sort of historical union thugs. I can't remember the name of Pinkertons. Amazon actually hired the Pinkerton agency to start union busting internationally. And so that does have an effect, because what happens is when people continue to be treated like temp workers and people continue to be squeezed into a gig economy, they can't necessarily own real estate. They're continuously placed. Amy, I can't listen to your phone call. They're continuously placed in a place where they are consumers and they are renters, serving a landlord and a serf, an owner, right? Amy, I really can't listen to you talk right now. Okay, so what happens is if you cannot buy the goods you are manufacturing, you get to a situation where people have no ownership. They have no ownership in their business. They are essentially owned by their employer. If something happens to them, they have no health care. They have no right to stand against their employer, because what ends up happening is they'll be replaced by anyone else, because there's a line of people that can take their job standing around the corner. So this destabilizes a market by making it so that the people that currently own are benefiting greatly. The people that need to buy are placed in a situation to where they're like, am I buying in a destabilized market or a market that is destined to crash? And the people that are working in businesses instead of owning businesses are in a situation where they are constantly expendable, they're marginalized, and put further and further into existing in the corners of society. And so now what was abnormal, which is the person working 60 to 80 hours a week, working 2 to 3 jobs, et cetera, and so forth, is becoming our new normal. And so people are sort of rebelling against that. They're starting to transact in cash. They're starting to start businesses without the ominous dominus of the government. And so it's going to make it harder for people to buy. And so more and more people are going to rent, and less people are going to be able to buy. And anyway. So what's going to happen is the rental market is going to continue to inflate. I think that housing prices will continue to inflate because they will be supported in a way that they weren't before in 2008. In 2008, nobody had equity when everything crashed. Now we're in a situation where we've seen this big, which, by all intents and purposes, was a crash. A lot of people lost their jobs, right? But we saw the owning class continue to have their stocks skyrocket. And so, like I said, what I was talking about earlier, the lower class in China, their wealth has grown to where they're like a lower middle class. The middle class in America has been squeezed out because our manufacturing has stopped. We've become temp workers. We've become people who work 2 to 3 jobs. We are not owners, and so we become marginalized. Our wealth has gone down. Well, simultaneously, the top 1% has had their wealth increase exponentially. And so what's happened is, instead of celebrating more and more new millionaires, we're checking to see who's going to be our first trillionaire. And that creates what is really an unhealthy economy that cannot be checked, because media is not in a situation to where it can say anything about it, because it's owned by the same people who own the majority of the stock, that own a majority of the real estate, et cetera, and so forth. But what is happening is, and this is what I'm getting to, in the next 15 to 20 years, if we're looking out that far, you're going to see the greatest redistribution of wealth in American history, and it's going to happen through real estate. $30 trillion is going to change hands over the course of the next 15 to 20 years, most economists are saying, due to the fact that people are going to be aging out of the workforce and entering into retirement homes. They're going to be, of course, passing away, leaving their real estate to their family members, and something like 95% of inherited wealth is spent within the first 5 years of it being inherited. Something like 85–90% of businesses which are inherited go under within the first 5 years of them being inherited, because, of course, people don't inherit talent, hard work, business ethics, et cetera, and so forth. That'd be like saying that just because somebody is an author, that their child is going to be a brilliant author. That's not necessarily the case. Just because someone is a great politician, that their child is going to be a great politician. So what happens is, people need the money now. They're not necessarily in the financial security that they're in the workplace, in their life, that their parents are, and they need that money to get out of debt. And so what do people do when they inherit money when they're in debt? Well, they spend it, of course. And so all of that to be said, what's going to happen is, in the rental market is, I believe, the rental market is going to continue to go like this, if not stabilize at the worst. And I don't necessarily think that we're going to see prices go down, because we're going to continue to see inventory entering the market due to death, due to retirement, due to people leaving California, due to people relocating with their job, et cetera, and so forth. Because what we're really seeing is the third great migration in America. The first two great migrations were race-based, predominantly. And people were going from the South into mainly city areas in search for work. And so, the American city was born and boomed in a way that nobody had ever seen before. And then, so anyway, the first one, and of course the wars ending was a huge part of it. Now, of course, I'm hoping that we're going to see a similar thing happen, and that we're going to see a lot of people returning to the civilian workforce. This, of course, is also going to put people in a situation to where they have to either become an employee, or they have to create a new job. Now, more and more veterans are starting jobs, or creating jobs, because they're becoming business owners, because a lot of them have the luxury of getting out with some retirement pay, which creates a situation where they're actually leveling up their position in life. So I think that what you're going to see is the rental market, of course, is going to go up. Ownership opportunities are going to be concentrated with the people that could already afford to do it. It's going to become more and more difficult for people who are cash poor to buy because people are going to have to bridge those contingency gaps. I saw a friend of mine post online, is the VA loan dead? Or the no money down loan dead? And, no, not necessarily, but we're going to have to get creative, right? We're also going to have to work on creating inventory, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can create inventory. Andres talks about one of them, of course, building, developing, creating housing that the average worker can afford. Because what has happened is, just like what Ford did for the automobile, he took it from luxury to affordable for the average consumer, therefore being a part of, like I said, that birth of the middle class, the average person being able to afford their own home, their own car, paying it off in their lifetime, having a steady infrastructure that appreciates over time. Part of that was every human, most human beings in America being afforded the first time opportunity to buy a car. He made it so that, it was like the equivalent of like a $5,000 today. So that his average worker can buy a car, therefore making it so that they can drive to new places. The average consumer can buy it. That way they can commute into work. And of course, we saw suburbia boom during this time. And there's a lot of terrible things that happened. Government got really legislated some horrible things. You could look into the history of Levittown. You could read The Color of Law to look into some of this. But of course, we could get way off into the woods here. And it's all, of course, a part of this story. Wars ending. Government enforced segregation, right? And so you're seeing for the first time some of this government enforced segregation is starting to lift. And people are starting to buy in different areas. New suburbs are being built. We're truly seeing an integration that we haven't seen before on a national level ever. And it's great for this country. And it's great for this economy. So I'm really grateful for the place that we're entering into. If you want to look more into this, this is called the post-boomer boom. And part of me wants to even just like play the video for you guys. We might even, I have to download it first. Look into the post-boomer boom by Economics Explained on YouTube, and you'll get a lot of really solid information for why it is not only a great time to get into real estate, but why it's a great time to consider purchasing real estate, because I really believe that there's a lot of money getting ready to change hands. And it does not pay to be owned. It pays to own. If you don't own your business, if you don't own your home, or if you're not at least paying it off or working towards it, you are at the will and employment of somebody else. If somebody else decides that they need to terminate you, if government has decided that you are expendable and that you are not essential, they can essentially mandate you right into poverty. And just like we talked about the other day, Dave Chappelle said, if you stand between a man and his ability to provide for his family and his ability to eat, that's the equivalent of killing a man, killing a person, right? So more and more people are going to start creating their own businesses. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get into contingency periods. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to walk us to the whiteboard over here. And maybe we'll turn a light around so that I don't look like I'm dying like I did in the high school class. Okay. If anybody has any questions at any given time, feel free to go ahead and jump in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get into this right now with contingency periods and escrow, kind of how that works a little bit. Because like I said, the high school students are already freaking licensed. They're already out there doing it. And so I had to kind of fast track some of this. We were talking about rentals. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to encourage too many people to get lost in working with renters, with rentals, because when you start working in real estate, you need to make money. Okay, and that is the truth. And if you're not making money and you're not working towards that first paycheck, then it's going to become very difficult for you and your family to continue to eat. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. So this is buyer and seller. We're going to talk about contingencies here and the earnest money deposit. Okay, so there are a lot of people saying that, so first off, what is an earnest money deposit? That was a question that was asked last time. An earnest money deposit is sort of like the good faith money that a buyer stands to lose if they do not perform if they don't perform during the escrow process. And of course, if you're going to write an offer, there's sort of this mentality of like, oh, the earnest money deposit has to be 1% of the purchase price, right? And that's sort of like, oh, you know what, we want to see, like if it's a $500,000 home, which is pretty normal in my area, we want to see $5,000 in the earnest money deposit. We want to see that they have some skin in the game, is sort of the old school way of thinking about it. But the truth is, the FHA VA mandatory clause made it almost impossible to touch an earnest money deposit anyway. Most VA buyers are cash poor, which is why we talked about earlier some of the speculation about, is the VA loan dead right now? And of course, I don't think so. I just think that we have to get creative with our answers, our solutions. So you'll hear a lot of agents buy into the narrative that their earnest money deposit has to be 1%. So $5,000, for example, for a $500,000 home. Not understanding that a lot of people who can afford a $2,500 monthly payment can't necessarily afford to set $5,000 aside to just sit on it in escrow and then risk to potentially lose it. So the correct way to handle this is to have a conversation with the agent. I mean, I've heard people say, really stupid things online, especially about California. Oh, in California, legally it has to be 1%, or legally, sellers expect 3% earnest money deposit. I don't know what market you're working in, and maybe it's a really hoity-toity one, but out here in Winchester, out here in French Valley, a 1% earnest money deposit will more than suffice. That being said, I have won multiple times, multiple offers by having significantly less than a 1% earnest money deposit. I'm talking a $500 earnest money deposit on a $400,000 home. And when they say, well, why is the earnest money deposit so low? Well, so listen, I understand where you're coming from, but the truth is they can afford to make the payments. They have never missed a payment for the last 8 years. They are pre-approved for this, or they are approved. They have DU underwriting already for their loan. We have no interest in losing an earnest money deposit. We want to close on the loan. We want you to get paid. We want to occupy. There's no interest that we have whatsoever in not performing, right? Now, a lot of people may offer you a $10,000 earnest money deposit, knowing that they could still get it back and flake out for any reason whatsoever in the first 17 days, and they can decide they don't like the weather. My clients are very familiar with the neighborhood. We love the area. I personally live here. I've told them about everything, the French Valley Airport. We're familiar with the fact that we're buying a resale. All these different things. We're not worried about the earnest money deposit because we plan on occupying the home. They're just cash poor. They're veterans. It's 2021. Who isn't cash poor in a lot of ways, right? So it's just about changing the narrative a little bit. So you can win, and of course we try to do at least $1,000 for the earnest money deposit. Here's an important thing to understand as well. So first off, 1% earnest money deposit, that's not necessarily the case. You can do significantly less than that. It's still going to be okay. Now, the other thing that I wanted to cover is the cost of the appraisal. So, oh geez, this is one of those things where I'm like, God help me spell check. Appraisal, I think that's right. I'll just write it sloppy enough to where nobody can understand what it is anyway. So the average appraisal, I would say, is $400. Though recently I saw a VA lender charge 600. Um, so you're going to want to find out how much it is. So I'm just going to put one to 2,000 right here for this because whatever. It is whatever. I'm just going to put 1,000 bucks, but it's just going to be kind of dependent on you and your ability to negotiate. Really, that's the truth with the Earnest Money Deposit. The appraisal, 400 to 600 bucks. Now understand, you're going to want to get your home inspection done like right away. Like right away. I'm talking like the first 3 to 5 days of starting your escrow, because you want to make sure that you're performing, you're not wasting anyone's time. You want to see if there's anything major that's wrong with the home that maybe another buyer would be okay with. You don't want to drag your feet the full 17 days. So we've got the inspection. And let's just say, this is going to be around 350 bucks or so. More if there's a pool, right? More if there's like a huge lot or multiple structures, et cetera, and so forth. And with the inspection, technically with this contingency period, you have 17 days. But with that 17 days, it helps to actually, you'll have more of an opportunity of winning if you write, a 7-day contingency period or a 10-day inspection contingency period. You get it done right away, you submit the request right away, and then that way everybody knows what they're dealing with and you can move forward, right? So the appraisal for VA, it's probably going to be 21 days. It is 21 days standard, but there will be people that they want to counter it out. Don't waive the appraisal unless you have the ability to cover the difference. Now, what does that mean? Now, let's say that you offer, there's a house, it's listed for $375,000, right? They're already above where they should be, right? So they're at 375, they're going crazy because everybody's going crazy in this market. They list their house, they had a model match that sold for 360, right? But they list it for 375 because they're like, oh, I know I'm going to be able to get it. And then what happens is a lot of people will come in with crazy offers, right? They'll come in and they'll be like, oh, let's offer 400,000, or let's offer 425,000. Not understanding, and then a buyer's agent will write it up for them, not understanding that the house has to appraise for that. So you can't just be in a situation where you decide that, well, hey, listen, I'm willing to pay 400,000 for it if the bank will not lend 400,000 for it, unless you've got the difference to cover so like if it was worth 360 and they jumped the gun, and I'm telling you, we have avoided so many traps this year just by doing a little bit of research before writing offers, and because these appraisers are going to protect the bank's asset. So if the house is worth 360, they list it for 375, and you offer 400,000 VA FHA, or even conventional, the bank will not lend on it, which means that you have to have the difference to cover between the appraised value and the offered value. And what's happening is a lot of listing agents have wisened up and they're negotiating this before they even get started. So they're saying, hey, listen, I want you to waive the appraisal contingency. And they'll say, well, okay, sure. Not understanding that what that means is you're going to pay 400,000 for that if you wrote the offer at 400,000. So often I will follow up immediately with the question, which is this. Okay, well, do your clients have the cash to cover the difference between the offered value and the appraised value? Yeah, I think so. Okay, will they bring that to the table if it doesn't appraise? Oh, how does that work? Well, that's the offer that you wrote me, right? And so we need to get to a situation to where we understand these offers, so we're not putting our clients in situations where we can't close at the 11th hour because we wrote an offer that we didn't understand, right? So buyers, write an offer that you understand. Do a market analysis on the property that you're writing it on. Understand it's going to have to be appraised for what you're writing it at. I've been in multiple situations where I've encouraged my VA buyers and said, hey, listen, at this point we can't even write on that. And it was the truth. We ended up finding a beautiful house. We got into escrow, or whatnot. And so like, and this has happened again and again and again. That's not the right one. They're already way overvalued. There's a home out there for you. This probably isn't the one. Unless you have, and listen, I'm going to write the offer if you want me to write it. And I will. I go through the process because a lot of times people need to see their offer rejected in order to understand that, you know, I'm not feeding them some BS. And so it is always my job to represent my clients properly. Now, if they want to write an offer that I would not necessarily want to write, but they want to send it, I'm going to send it anyway because that's my job, right? I am representing them. They ask me to write up an offer, I'm going to write it up, okay? I will coach them. I will advise them. I will be their advisor and talk to them about, okay, this house is actually worth this. Now, working in Laguna Hills, you know, or, you know, which I'm doing, and we're closing an escrow there today. Yes, with somebody that I served in Afghanistan with, which is fantastic. I'm extraordinarily proud of him, but I'm not going to blow it for him yet. Anyway, I served in Afghanistan with this man, registered nurse in Laguna, and now he's buying a house. And I'm just so happy for him. And I got to be a part of it. My wife got to be a part of it. And I have coached him over the years in real estate to help him understand what it is that he's going to need to do to buy. And he put himself in an excellent position and was able to use his VA loan to buy. And he also has the cash to where he's not necessarily hurting. He, you know, like I said, him and his fiance set themselves up. They're closing today, and I'm proud of them. So make sure that you're writing an offer that you understand. Advise your clients accordingly. Okay, so if you write it at 360, excuse me, if the house is worth 360, you see it's listed at 375, you're talking to the clients or the agent and says, hey, listen, we're up like over 390, and that's all I can tell you right now. Then what you do is you don't tell your clients, hey, listen, we're out. Bummer. On to the next one. What you do is you tell them, okay, I know that the offers are over 390 at this point, which means that there's a good chance that somebody's going to end up having to take $30,000 to the table in order to get that to close. Don't assume somebody's financial situation. Just advise them based on what they would need to do in order to win, right? Because then if you get that information back from, my phone's going off, it's driving me nuts. If you advise them accordingly and you tell them what they need to do to close or to open the escrow, you'll have a much better shot at getting into escrow and then closing on the deal because there won't be any 11th hour surprises, okay? So if the house ends up appraising at 385 and you offered 385, you're golden. If the house appraises at 375 and you offered 385, then you're probably going to end up in a situation where you're going to need to take $10,000 to the table if you waive the appraisal contingency. If you didn't waive the appraisal contingency, then you're not going to have to take that money to the table. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the earnest money deposit, we talked about that. We talked about the appraisal. Now, some lenders cover their earnest money deposit for their clients. Some lenders do not. You're going to want to find out what that is because, of course, if you put down a $1,000 earnest money deposit and you scrape that together and then you back out because you decided, you know, the home inspection came back bad or whatever, or the appraisal was not where you necessarily wanted it to be or whatever, there's mold in the house, and you go to back out, your lender may take $400 to $600 of your earnest money deposit. Now, for a lot of buyers, this sets them right back to the drawing table. It sets them right back to the beginning because now they have to come up with all that money again. So you want to make sure that you are working with a lender who is covering that appraisal for their clients so that your clients get their earnest money deposit back, their entire earnest money deposit back in the event that you fall out of escrow. Also, when you're structuring the offer, there's a way that you can structure that VA offer that makes it so that that earnest money deposit does not get applied to the loan, but in fact gets refunded back to the buyers at close of escrow. So you want to make sure that when you're writing in the loan amount, you're writing in the full amount, not the full amount minus the earnest money deposit, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, like I said, let me know in the questions. Let me know in Zoom. and I will answer those questions for you. Okay, so moving on. The termite is, okay, so what do I want to write first? The termite and the inspection is typically about 75 bucks. And a termite inspection is typically paid for by the seller. In fact, there are rules that, like, I think that the VA, in a VA loan, you can't even pay for the inspection as a buyer or something like that. But don't quote me on that because I don't want to get too off in the woods, like I said. But the seller, in like the 434 plus transactions that I've been involved in, has paid for the termite inspection. Now, what the termite inspection does is it gives the VA an opportunity to decide whether or not they're investing in a stable structure, in a safe and sound structure. And so what they're looking for is if there's any Section 1 termite damage. Section 1 termite damage is considered dry rot, fungus, mold, evidence of a past termite infestation which was not treated, a current termite infestation, or damaged or exposed wood. Now, you're going to find a lot of this in some of these older homes in Temecula where they've got those wooden wooden decks or whatnot. You can poke the bottom and you see that it's chipped or whatnot. And if you were to put a pin in it, it would just sort of like be soft. That's considered Section 1 termite damage. Sometimes you'll see it around like a screen door. You'll see some fungus or whatnot growing around a garage door or whatnot. A lot of places, a lot of times you see it in these older homes. Gosh, this is where I admit that I don't know what the names are for everything. But this is where you're going to look as you're walking through. And of course, as you're doing a walkthrough or an inspection, you're doing a seller's consultation, I like to look for Section 1 termite damage while I'm walking through the home. And what you're going to do is you're going to find a lot of it on these, are these called eaves? Whatever the heck these things are. And you'll find it along the lower end here because that's where water tends to concentrate and leak off, especially if people don't have rain gutters, which a lot of people don't because we don't see a lot of rain. You'll see a lot of Section 1 sometimes at the bottom of the house where if the water is not draining properly, you'll see it kind of around here. You'll also see Section 1, shh, quiet, beat you guys up. You'll also see it around the windows, around here. You'll see it down around here. And so you're just getting like a lot of where the trim is around the home. That's where the Section 1 is. Now, of course, they do not test the fence. They're not going to test the shared structure, but you will need a Section 1 termite clearance in order to get that to fund. Now, let's see, termite. Oh, now the other thing that the seller needs to do is they need to prepare what's called the SBQ and the TDS. Now, they can also do their own home inspection. We talked about that during the reading. And we're going to get into the SBQ and the TDS here in a moment. But before we do, let's jump into the home inspection. Some sellers might elect to get their own home inspection, pay $350, get their own home inspection, to protect themselves as part of a pre-listing package. You post the home inspection online on the MLS. It lets people know exactly what is wrong with the house. That way when they go in, you're not coming in and negotiating. You're not coming in at day 14, day 17 and negotiating. Everything has already been addressed. And then that way when your sellers are listed, they're not waiting for a bunch of contingency periods. Everything is disclosed. They already have their termite. They already have the clearance. They already have their SBQ and their TDS done. They already have their inspection handled. So they know exactly what is going on with their home. There is no surprises when they hit the market and they enter into that dreaded escrow process. Now, getting into the SBQ and the TDS, a lot of people want to prepare the SBQ and the TDS, and in fact, it is encouraged in the reading before the home hits the market. This is what is called the seller property questionnaire and the transfer disclosure statement. Now, the seller property questionnaire and the transfer disclosure statement, that's basically your seller's opportunity to disclose everything that has happened to the home, everything that they have improved on the home, etc. and so forth. That leak that happened, that got treated, the new floors, whatever it is that they had done, disclose, disclose, disclose. Sometimes I'll have somebody tell me, oh, you know what? We did have a leak, but we pretty much took care of it, and you can't really tell anyway. Should I put that out there? And I say, absolutely. Put it on the SBQ and the TDS so that they can't come back to you down the road and try to sue your butt off, try to sue my butt off. And of course, because you disclose it to me, and I don't say this part, because you disclosed it to me, I have to disclose it anyway. But I do tell them, yeah, just go ahead and put it on there, and then just double check to make sure that it made its way onto the report. Because as the listing agent, the SBQ and the TDS is actually your responsibility. Okay. All right. So that is the SBQ, the TDS. Technically, the seller contingency period is 7 days. That being said, it is very hard to back out of a transaction once you've entered into one as a seller, right? Once you've executed docs and everything, it's very, very hard to back out without ending up in court if the buyer decided that they wanted to push it there. The buyer on a standard inspection, standard contingency, 17 days. Appraisal for VA, 21 days. Of course, there are ways to shorten these inspection contingencies, but you have to do so in writing. Now, all of this being said, the most important thing to understand, if you did not understand any of this so far, is that contingencies have to be removed in writing. For your buyer, which is part of the reason why we get into the notice for the buyer to perform and the demand to close, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. So a lot of times what will happen is, day 17 will roll around, the transaction's going pretty smooth, and so, nobody decides to remove contingencies because, why not? The inspection's been done, the requests have been agreed upon. Day 30, day 31 rolls around. Oh, that's my 5-minute warning. Hold up, 2 seconds. Okay. So day 20 or day 30, day 31 rolls around. You're supposed to close escrow. Your clients have moved out of the state already. They're continuing to pay a mortgage, but the contingencies were never removed in writing. So if the contingencies were never removed, that earnest money deposit, which may, like I said, if it's 1%, $5,000, and a lot of times people won't hold on to this anyway. But if it's $2,000, a lot of times I say just make sure that it's enough to cover your mortgage payment in the event that something happens, right? So I tell them you just want it to cover your mortgage payment in the event that something happens, so that we could get your house relisted and get it back out there in the world. But the most important thing is that it closes. So day 17, get it removed. Day 21, get the contingencies removed. If you're on the buyer side, you of course can drag your feet a little bit. And of course, if you do, or if you don't necessarily remove the contingencies in writing, then you are protecting your clients and putting them in a situation to where you're closing. And a lot of times we end up closing escrow with having never removed contingencies. And that's the truth. Now, if somebody's really on their game, and there are several agents that are, those contingencies get removed. And now here's the truth. If somebody's really on their game and the market's this good, and you failed to perform, and it took you 60 days, there's also a good chance that they might be getting more money than they were going to get from you anyway, which is what happened with us here in a recent situation when I was representing the buyer. And so they actually let us have the entire earnest money deposit back, even though we had removed all of our contingencies. And this lady, this real estate agent, this gal, and I won't say her name, but she really, her and her clients, they helped my clients out. They really put them in a situation where they got their entire earnest money deposit back, even though we had removed, because she said, I don't want to do this to another human being. And then they got $20,000 more for their home. Okay, all right, so we talked about what's happening in the rental market. We went into depth on that, in fact. We talked about what to expect. We went over contingency periods, responsibilities, and the earnest money deposit. Now, of course, if the buyer is not removing their contingencies in writing, you can issue what's called a notice of buyer to perform. Okay, the notice for the buyer to perform basically just like lets them know, like, hey, listen, You got to get those contingencies removed. We're watching you. The demand to close, that's when you get closer to actually closing escrow, and that puts them in a situation to where either the notice of buyer to perform, demand to release contingencies, demand to close, they don't comply. They're put in a situation where if they don't comply in a certain amount of time, they have to either walk away, keep their earnest money deposit. You keep their earnest money deposit. They remove the contingencies, et cetera, so forth. Whatever it is that you outline in there. Okay, I'm going to get to some of these questions here really quick in the Zoom before we move on. Tom, good morning to you. Tom, we owe you a phone call. You've got to call me, my brother. Like, you tell me that I need to call you during class, and I keep forgetting. So let's reach out to me directly. Here's my phone number, 951-691-7798. Text me. I'll get back to you by the end of the day today. Because a lot of times I forget about these comments, and I just sort of like move on. And I want to talk with you. I don't want you to feel forgotten. Okay. Congratulations to him. Grateful for his service. Thanks, Mom. All right. If a buyer purchases a home for $400,000 that appraised at $375,000, do they not only need to come in with the $25,000, but also the 3.5% down? 100%. That is absolutely correct. So if it's the kind of thing to where it's a conventional loan, you've removed your appraisal contingency, right? You are putting 20% down. Okay, so it's a $400,000 home. You're putting 20% down, which means that you're putting $80,000 down. Let's say you, and we won't get into earnest money deposit because it will only confuse us. But you put that 80% down, 20% down, which means that you're financing 80%, which is $320,000. Okay, now let's say that what happens is the house appraises for. Throw out a number to me. Don't be too mean. Let's say it appraises for 375, like what you were going to say, right? 375. Then what that means is the bank will finance 375. They get an opportunity to either restructure their loan. Let's say that they don't, now they're not putting 20% down. Maybe they're putting 15% down, right? And then what happens is that means that now their monthly payment goes up, and now they have to pay for PMIs, right? Mortgage insurance. And so what happens is they're guaranteeing that they're going to bring not only the 20% down, so if the house appraises at 375 and it goes for 400, they have to put 20% down of 375,000. Okay, but then they also have to cover the additional difference, the 375 to 400, which is 25,000, right? So 20% down of 375,000. God help me right now. We'll just go ahead and the way that you would figure that out for those of you that haven't been doing this as long as I have and don't have a calculator right now. It's 375,000 times what did you say? You asked me like it's a question. Times 0.2. So it's just times 0.2. So it's $75,000. So which means that they have to continue to put the $75,000 down in order to avoid the PMIs, right? So the math on that would be they put a $400,000 offer in, conventional. It appraises at 375, which means that the bank is going to fund 375. They're putting $75,000 down, which is the 20% down. Plus, they're bringing $25,000 to the table in order to close. Okay, if they're so yeah, that's if that was 20. If it's 3.5%, then the numbers are of course just a little bit different. It's 375 times, and of course now we're talking FHA times. What would that be? 0.035, which means that the down payment would be $13,125, so which is 3.5%. Okay, plus the cash difference. Now you don't see a lot of FHA buyers that have a lot of cash. They're kind of an anomaly. Normally at that point they've decided to go conventional. But in the event, let's say we've got this, what happens is, let's say an FHA buyer is allowed to receive gift funds, or they have access to money from their retirement, And of course, you have to talk to a lender about all this different stuff. But what would happen is the 375 would be the amount financed, okay, minus the 3.5%, which is $13,125. But they would still be responsible if they have waived the appraisal for that additional 25,000, which means that so we'll just go plus 25,000 for the sake of 38,125 bucks, which again, you have to decide whether or not that's something that you want to do. The reason why I don't waive the appraisals for a lot of my VA clients is because they can't afford to cover the difference. So I have to tell the listing agent, listen, the reason why I wrote the offer the way that I did is because here are the comps. I strongly believe that it's going to appraise for these reasons. In the event that we are going to, we experience an appraisal difference, we can cover it up to 5,000. We can cover it up to 3,000, or we can't cover it at all. Don't even talk about it, right? There's a lot of different things that you could do, a lot of different ways that you can get creative, but the most important thing that you can do is make sure that your lender has a very honest conversation with your buyer about their monthly payment. That's the big one. A lot of these lenders want to avoid that conversation for whatever reason. That's sort of the big one. Monthly payment. You get a good lender, they're going to give you a solid monthly payment. That's going to include the local taxes for your area specifically. They're going to tell you, of course, what your rate is. They're going to get you fixed in and whatnot. But the monthly payment is important. They're going to tell you what is required to put down. People are getting really tired of being told that they have to take an additional $2,000 or to take freaking $4,000. Just tell them right up front, right at the beginning. Listen, we'll cover this much in your closing costs. And we've actually gotten to this in a prior class, which is different ways to structure an offer with whether or not lenders will cover closing costs, whether or not you can roll it into a rate, whether or not you can write it on top of the loan, et cetera, and so forth. So you want to make sure that the lender tells them how much money they're going to have to put down in order to close and how much their monthly payment is going to be, including the HOA, including the local taxes, special assessments, et cetera, and so forth. If you're not getting that, it makes everything else very difficult. Okay, you guys, that's it for the class. Let me check Zoom to see if anybody had any questions in the Zoom chat. Timothy, Cheryl, Amy, good morning. Christy, Daniela, hello, everybody. Does anyone have any questions for me this morning? Okay. It's okay, you don't have to. All right. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to kill the Facebook Live broadcast. I'll stick around for a moment on Zoom to see if anybody has anything to say. Bye, everybody on Facebook. Feel free to start whenever you want to start. If this is your day one, that's 100% okay. You can still start earning commission today working as a unlicensed finder, as somebody who finds and identifies people who need to buy and sell real estate. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.